Stay tuned. Ahead I'll talk with Dr. Michael Greger about the How Not to Age Cookbook, 100-plus recipes for getting healthier and living longer. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Michael Greger, MD, is a physician, best-selling author, and internationally recognized speaker on nutrition. He's a graduate of Cornell University and Tufts University School of Medicine. He's also a founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. 3 of his recent books, How Not to Die, the How Not to Die Cookbook, and How Not to Diet, were all New York Times bestsellers. He joins us to talk about the How Not to Age Cookbook, 100-plus recipes for getting healthier and living longer. Dr. Greger, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
In the introduction to the cookbook, you talk about how this is in many ways an extension of your How Not to Age book. So tell us a bit about that book and this new cookbook.
The How Not to Age, this is kind of the companion manual for it. The goal was really to create kind of the most comprehensive anti-aging book ever written, covering every possible strategy for slowing down the aging process for the longest, healthiest life based on the best available scientific evidence. And the good news is that we have tremendous power over our health, destiny, and longevity, and that the vast majority of premature death and disability is preventable with a healthy enough diet and lifestyle. But I didn't want it to just be a reference book. Yes, there's 13,000 citations, but I wanted it to be kind of a day-to-day grocery store style kind of practical guide, how to actually include some of these healthiest of healthy foods into your life. And so there came the How Not to Age Cookbook to take some of the foods that I identified to be some of the most promising for longevity and figure ways to make them taste delicious.
And one of the points you make in that introduction is it's not old age that kills us, it's the disease that come and are more of a risk at old age. So if we can cut back on the risk of those diseases, potentially we can live longer.
Yeah, based on studies of 42,000 consecutive autopsies, centenarians, those lived to be 100, were found to have succumbed to disease in 100% of cases. So though most were perceived, even by their physicians, to have been healthy just prior to death, not a single one, quote unquote, died of old age, right? They died from disease, most commonly heart disease, the number one killer of men and women in general. So look, there's only one diet that's ever been shown to reverse the progression of our leading killer in the majority of patients, and that is a plant-based diet. So if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the number one killer of men and women, then, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also be so effective in treating, arresting, and reversing other leading killers like high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, it really seemed to make the case for eating more plants simply overwhelming at this point.
When you use the term plant-based diet, would this be the same thing that some people would refer to as a vegan diet?
We should eat primarily plants, not necessarily exclusively plants. A plant-based diet is really more just about kind of maximizing the intake of the healthiest foods, right? As a physician, labels like vegetarian or vegan, that just tells me what you don't eat. Do you actually eat vegetables? And look, it doesn't matter what you eat on your birthdays, holidays, special occasions. It's the day-to-day basis that really adds up. And, on a daily basis, we should try to center our diets around natural foods from fields, not factories, these unprocessed plant foods.
So ideally, adopting a plant-based diet, most of the time, you say, there are a few exceptions that are okay, it would be ideal. But if you're even willing to adopt that partially, can you see some of the benefits?
Oh, absolutely. One need not make drastic changes. It's not all or nothing. Even just basic, common sense lifestyle factors can mean living literally a decade longer. Not smoking, not being obese, regular exercise, more fruits and vegetables, and it's never too late. Right? Never too late to stop smoking, never too late to start eating healthier, never too late to start moving more. Really do have the power.
I want to talk to you more about some of the principles behind those recipes which allow people to, do those things in hopefully a delicious way. But let's talk about some of them. And one of them is the sort of the anti-aging 8. Tell us about those.
Yeah, the anti-aging 8 is, well, I mean, there were certain foods that came up over and over again, whether I'm talking about vision or preserving your cognition as we get older, or your bones or your muscles or, sex life and skin, on down the list, things kept coming over and over again. So my anti-aging, it was really meant to kind of highlight specific foods and actions that offer the potential to have some of the kind of best opportunities to slow aging and improve longevity. Kind of as a complement to my daily dozen checklist of the healthiest of healthy foods I encourage people to fit into their daily routine from my previous book, How Not to Die. So, not just, fruits and vegetables are great, but specifically berries, the healthiest fruits, dark green leafy vegetables, the healthiest vegetables, a tablespoon of ground flax seeds, a quarter teaspoon of turmeric, the best beverages, how much exercise to get. Again, trying to just something to aspire to. In terms of fitting some of these healthiest things into their daily routine, and it's all available on a free app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, if you want to kind of track your progress by seeing how many boxes you can check off every day.
So those 12 would include those 8, but what additionally is in that 12?
Oh, so legumes. So the healthiest source of protein. So beans, split peas, chickpeas, or lentils. So you'll note there's a whole section in the cookbook just on bean dishes. And so it's not just like bean soups and chiles and burritos and things, but, you can make bean dips and hummus, and there's all sorts of ways that you can incorporate beans, into one's diet that doesn't necessarily, kind of the typical kind of baked beans, there's lentil soup, kind of on down the list. And all of the blue zones, these areas of exceptional longevity around the world, where they have up to 10 times the rate of those reaching triple digits, they all center their diets around one form of legume or another. And so yeah, lots of beans in the cookbook.
Another food that you promote as being healthy are nuts. So tell us a bit more about nuts and sort of maybe the best nuts or maybe nuts that aren't quite as good for our health.
Oh yeah. So by nuts, we're kind of excluding coconuts, which aren't kind of botanically nuts. And coconuts and chestnuts aren't really nuts, but the other nuts, the so-called tree nuts, like walnuts, probably the healthiest. Nuts. One of the reason nuts are so good for us, basically on a kind of a gram for gram basis compared to any other food group, consumption of nuts is associated with the lowest risk of premature death. A palmful of nuts every day, kind of, which is like a single ounce, may be enough to offer maximal benefit. Though too many nuts over a cup a day may increase the risk of kidney stones just because their oxalate content. And unfortunately, peanut butter consumption does not appear to have the same salutary effects. But of all nuts, walnuts are probably the healthiest, the only nuts that have been shown to actually improve artery function acutely. And so a palmful of walnuts a day would be my prescription and fulfilling the anti-aging prescription, the anti-aging 8 prescription for the day.
And you also point out about nuts that it's better to have them in raw form as opposed to roasted and salted and honeyed and all those other things you can do to nuts.
Yeah, unfortunately, just because it tastes so much better when it's toasted or roasted, really brings out some of the flavor. But unfortunately, some of that flavor is coming from these what are called advanced glycation end products. So when you take kind of high-fat, high-protein foods and expose them to high, dry heat, like toasting, roasting, broiling, frying, these so-called glycotoxins, AGEs, are born, and they're involved in a variety of pro-aging processes. And so most AGEs come from things like broiled hot dogs and chicken nuggets and things like that. But there are some healthier foods that can produce those as well. So we should better not to have Cajun blackened tofu. Moist methods of cooking tend to be preferable, such as steaming or boiling, making soups. kind of thing, just to keep the temperature low enough so these compounds aren't created. So yeah, raw nuts and raw nut and seed butters would be the way to go.
So tell us more about the recipes in this book, because there is a wide variety of recipes.
Yeah, it's kind of an eclectic mix. For breakfast, there are, savory options like breakfast burritos, egg-free frittatas, sweet options like the baked carrot cake, oatmeal, or millet brunch cake with strawberries. For lunch, there's the more typical kind of soup salad sandwich type options, like, oyster mushroom chowder, a Thai purple cabbage slaw, cheese-free quesadillas, lots of creamy pasta recipes. For snack options, there's like, artichoke stuffed mushrooms. Mushrooms play a big role in the How Not to Age cookbook. It's, very international. There are, jambalayas, Indonesian satays, risotto, shepherd's pie. And then a lot of berry-based desserts like crumbles and tarts. And not only is every recipe healthy, but every single ingredient of every single recipe is healthy. So it's like, wait a second, how do you make something salty without salt or sweet without sugar? Those are some of the challenges we faced, and I'm really proud of how we did.
So how would you gauge the difficulty level of these? If you're
It really spans the gambit. So there are some kind of special kind of holiday kind of type meals that would require a lot of preparation. But mostly they're kind of easy, simple. A lot of things can be batch cooked, so you make kind of big, big batch on a weekend when you have some time, and and eat portions kind of throughout the week. So I think most are simple, but there are a few that you want to clear your calendar for.
The other thing I should point out about this cookbook is it's a beautiful cookbook. It's a feast for the eyes. There's some wonderful food photography here.
Isn't it beautiful? I think it's the best. So this is my third cookbook. There's the How Not to Age Cookbook, How Not to Die Cookbook, How Not to Die Cookbook, and now the How Not to Age Cookbook. I think this is the best one they've done yet. They all look really pretty, but they just put so much work into it. I can't imagine how long it took them to. It would be neat to kind of be a fly on the wall during one of these sessions, but you could just imagine, God, it would take forever. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree.
There, as we pointed out, these are recipes that are based on a plant-based diet to help us live a healthier life. So eating appropriately and a plant-based diet is one of the strategies for living longer. What are some of the other strategies you would point out, in addition to diet, that one should follow to try to live a long, healthy life?
Oh, yeah. So I talk about a number of other important lifestyle aspects. So it's not just about diet, even though it's about, based on studies of identical twins, only about 25% of the difference in lifespan between people is due to genetics. So what can we do over the majority of which we have control? Diet appears to be the largest factor, according to the Global Burden of Disease study, which is the largest study of risk factors in history. But, that's not all. There are one also has to incorporate exercise, the benefits for the overall health benefits of exercise, absolutely overwhelming the evidence. It can improve physical activity, improves muscle mass and strength and balance and mobility, decreases the risk of falls, minimizes bone loss. And that's just the beginning. That's like the typical things, but it also improves cognition, enhances mood, can treat depression, improves artery function, erectile dysfunction, insulin sensitivity, overall quality of life. And so exercise is critically important. I talk about sleep. I talk about stress management, talk about weight control, talk about social ties. So there's a lot of aspects of these so-called blue zones beyond just their healthy diets, which may be contributing to their longevity.
Dr. Greger, you've written a lot of books that have become bestsellers. I'm curious, what's next for you?
The next book is How Not to Hurt, talking about natural alternatives for pain management. So I'll be going through all the common pain syndromes, from osteoarthritis to migraines to irritable bowel to, menstrual pain, on down the list, musculoskeletal issues, and just trying to find out. It turns out there are certain foods like ginger, like turmeric, that appear perhaps through their anti-inflammatory properties to tamp down pain in a number of different areas. And so I've been digging into that. It'll be out at the end of next year, end of 2027, and then 2028, the How Not to Hurt Cookbook. And we could come up with some more recipes composed of whatever other kind of pain-relieving foods I can find on the list.
Well, to learn more, the book is The How Not to Age Cookbook, 100 plus recipes for getting healthier and living longer by Dr. Michael Greger. Dr. Greger, thank you for talking with me today.
So happy to be back. Looking forward to coming on next time.
If you'd like to purchase the How Not to Age Cookbook, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.